My name is Lydia Cole. And today my son texted me like I was the hired help. The message came in at 3:42 on a Tuesday afternoon while I was folding his laundry. A task I'd somehow kept doing, even after retiring from the courthouse. Mom, we're heading to Harbor House for Caleb's birthday. Please clean up before guests arrive. Thanks. No invitation. Just instructions short. Efficient. Like a work memo from a boss who's forgotten you're his mother. I read that message 3 times, waiting for the sting to fade. It didn't. My son Darren was taking his wife Sloane and our family to the same restaurant where he'd once proposed, and yet I was expected to stay home and make the place spotless for their return. For a moment, I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. The woman who kept this family together for decades now, treated like the cleaning crew. Here's the contradiction that'll divide anyone listening. Can a child still be called loving if he's convinced he's protecting his mother while quietly using her as help? I sat there with that thought and realized something far worse. This wasn't my home anymore. I'd been a guest for 8 years in a house that still bore my name on the deed. So, I did exactly what his message asked. I cleaned up. Then I packed my bags and left. The next morning, I signed a lease for a small 1-bedroom apartment near the county courthouse. It wasn't much, just a clean kitchen, a sunlit window, and floors that creaked like old wood remembering better days, but it was mine. I paid the deposit in cash, opened a new checking account, and changed every password tied to my old address. Click. Each signature felt like cutting an invisible thread that had kept me bound to a life that no longer fit. When the movers arrived, they found me labeling boxes in my usual courthouse fashion, each numbered, cross-referenced, and listed in a notebook I'd used since the year Darren was born. I carried only what mattered: my books, my mother's china, Robert's watch, and the journal where I'd recorded every major decision since his death. I left the rest behind. The white couches, the designer lamps, all the proof of Sloane's perfect life. None of it had ever belonged to me. That first night, I sat on the floor with a cup of instant coffee and listened to the quiet hum of my new refrigerator. The silence was sharp but clean, free of the footsteps and constant demands that had filled the old house. For the first time in years, I didn't need to ask permission to exist. My phone buzzed on the counter. It was Caleb, my grandson. His message was short but trembling with urgency. Grandma, I found something in Dad's office. You need to see this. I stared at the screen, a slow chill settling over me. Freedom, it seemed, had come with a new kind of reckoning. Caleb showed up the next afternoon, pale and tense, carrying a yellow envelope that looked far too serious for a college kid. We sat at my small kitchen table, the one that barely fit 2 chairs. As he slid the papers toward me, inside were photocopies of a document labeled Power of Attorney, my name, Darren's signature, and a date I recognized from 2 years earlier. Beneath it sat a loan statement for a second mortgage of $82,000 taken against my house. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My son had borrowed money using my home as collateral, without my knowledge, without even a conversation. Caleb's voice broke the silence. He told me he'd found the files while working on a school project about business ethics, and the numbers didn't make sense. They said it was for expanding Dad's remodeling company. He whispered, but most of the transactions go to car payments and personal credit cards. He pulled out one more sheet, a dealership invoice for $64,000. Sloane's new luxury car. I stared at her name on the receipt, realizing that the money they'd claimed was for family investment had gone straight into their image of success. Caleb's eyes were wet, but steady. I think they used your house like an ATM, he said. I leaned back, feeling the weight of betrayal settle over me like cold rain. Love, I realized, it could make you blind enough to sign away your own security. But ignorance had an expiration date, and mine had just ended. By Thursday, I was sitting across from Renee Talbot, a woman whose calm voice carried the quiet weight of authority. She'd spent 30 years handling cases of elder financial abuse and knew every loophole men like Darren thought they could hide behind. Her office smelled of coffee and paper, comforting, precise, and utterly no nonsense. She studied the documents Caleb had brought me, then looked up with an expression that mixed sympathy and restrained fury. "Your son misused a power of attorney," she said evenly. "And that makes this both a civil and potentially criminal matter." She laid out the strategy in 4 deliberate steps. First, revoke the power of attorney immediately before he could touch another dollar. Second, issue a formal demand for repayment and full disclosure of every transaction tied to the mortgage. Third, alert the bank to dispute his authority, freezing any further loans against the property. And finally, prepare for litigation if he refused to comply. Each point landed like a nail sealing a coffin. I took notes the way I had in courtrooms decades ago, my handwriting slow but steady. Renee paused, studying my face. "If they can't pay back the loan, Mrs. Cole," she said quietly, "they'll have to sell the house. Are you prepared for that?" I thought of Sloane's perfect kitchen, Darren's polished office, the rooms that used to be mine. "Yes," I said. "I'm prepared for everything now." That evening, I sat at my small kitchen table again, the same spot where Caleb had handed me the truth. My phone was on speaker, and the recorder app blinked red beside it. In our state, one-party consent made it legal as long as I knew what I was doing. And I did. My hand didn't shake when I dialed Darren's number. He answered on the 3rd ring. His voice clipped. "Wary." I told him calmly that the call was being recorded, that I wanted to clarify a few financial matters. For a moment, silence stretched between us, heavy and brittle. Then he started talking fast, the way people do when they're afraid of where a conversation might go. He said the mortgage was just a temporary move to protect family assets, that he'd planned to tell me once the business stabilized. His words sounded polished, rehearsed, like something Sloane might have helped him practice. I asked him directly if the loan had paid for credit cards, or the luxury car registered in his wife's name. The pause that followed was long enough to say everything. When he finally spoke, it was barely a whisper. "Some of it, yes." I stared at the blinking red light until it stopped feeling like a recording and more like a confession. "Thank you," I said quietly. That's all I needed. Before he could ask what came next, I ended the call. From now on, he would be talking to my lawyer, not his mother. 2 days later, Caleb came by again, this time with a different kind of evidence. He'd been scrolling through Darren's shared business drive for a marketing project when he stumbled upon a folder labeled Invoices, Personal. Inside were receipts from a luxury hotel downtown, dated for weekends when Darren had claimed to be overseeing renovation jobs in another city. Alongside them was an email confirmation for a spa package booked under the names Sloane Mercer and Colton Avery. Caleb's voice shook when he told me. He'd recognized Colton's name from Sloane's social media, a local car dealer she'd praised endlessly for helping the brand. Now, it was clear he'd been helping with much more. There were also photos saved from her public posts, tagged from the same locations and dates as the hotel invoices. The puzzle came together in painful clarity. Sloane's affair had started around the same time Darren's debt did. I thanked Caleb quietly, asking him not to tell his parents he'd found anything. He nodded. his face pale, but resolved. When he left, I spread the documents across my table under the soft kitchen light. The betrayal wasn't just financial anymore, it was personal, corrosive, and complete. Still, anger wouldn't help me. Evidence would. The next morning, I scanned everything into a neat folder and delivered it to Renee Talbot's office. Now, I told her, we know the motive behind the money. By the end of the week, Renee had drafted what she called a 4-page wake-up call. It was a formal demand letter addressed to Darren and Sloan, outlining every unauthorized transaction, the misuse of the power of attorney, and the total debt of $82,000. The letter required immediate repayment, a full disclosure of all accounts connected to my property, and confirmation that no additional loans had been made. They had 30 days to comply before litigation and criminal proceedings would begin. Renee's tone never wavered as she explained the next step. She'd also contacted the bank to dispute Darren's authority and placed a temporary freeze on any access to the home's equity. No more money moves until we say so, she said, sliding the signed documents across her desk. Watching her work felt like watching justice put on its boots slow, deliberate, unstoppable. For the first time, the law was moving on my side of the table. That evening, my phone buzzed with a call from Sloan. Her voice came through shrill and panicked, accusing me of tearing her family apart. I let her finish, her words dissolving into static. When she finally paused, I said the only thing that mattered. You spent years living off my silence. Sloan, that ends now. Then I hung up, leaving her to face the echo of her own choices. A week after the letter went out, Darren called to invite me to dinner. He said they wanted to talk things through, make peace, clear the air. The tone was too polished, too careful. The kind people use when they're already rehearsing their version of events. I accepted without hesitation. Not because I believed in reconciliation, but because I wanted the truth to surface where it couldn't hide. When I arrived, the dining table was set with white candles and food that looked untouched. Sloan greeted me with a smile so tight it might have cracked if I breathed too hard. Darren tried small talk about work and Caleb's classes, but his eyes kept darting to my handbag, the one holding a small digital recorder, already running. I waited until the plates cooled before speaking. I asked 3 questions, each one precise, each one leaving no room for lies. Who signed the authorization for the mortgage transfer? Whose name was on the car bought with the loan? And who booked the hotel suite under Sloan, Mercer, and Colton Avery? The silence afterward was almost tender. Sloan's hand froze midair. Darren's face drained of color, and the sound of their breathing filled the room. I slid a sealed envelope across the table. Inside was a drafted agreement: sell the house, repay the debt, and I'd forego legal charges. Sloan ripped it in half, her voice breaking into a shriek. I stood, calm and finished. Good, I said. Then we'll let the court handle the rest. The demand letter had done its work. Within weeks, the bank confirmed the power of attorney had been revoked, and Darren's accounts were flagged for misuse. Their credit line vanished overnight, leaving the renovation business gasping for air, without the house to anchor their loans. Every unpaid bill and late payment surfaced like wreckage after a storm. The bank issued an ultimatum: repay the debt or liquidate the property. They tried to stall, to negotiate, but the figures didn't lie. The house was listed within 10 days, and the for sale sign stood on the front lawn like a confession in bold print. When it sold, the proceeds went straight to clearing both mortgages and legal costs, leaving little more than dust and regret. Sloane disappeared from social media after her affair reached the local gossip cycle. Sponsors dropped her, and her name became shorthand for bad optics. Darren downsized his company, taking on small handyman jobs to stay afloat. The glamorous couple who once hosted dinner parties now lived in a rented duplex near the highway. Caleb visited me every Sunday, bringing coffee and quiet conversation. He said his parents barely spoke anymore, that every argument ended with blame and silence. "They think you destroyed them," he told me once. I smiled, not cruelly, but truthfully. "No," I said. "They built their house on lies. I just made sure the foundation gave way." When the dust finally settled, Renee handed me the closing file, every document signed, every cent accounted for. The house was gone. The loans were cleared, and my name was restored as the sole legal owner on record before the sale. It wasn't triumph. I felt it was precision. The satisfaction of setting a crooked frame straight. Darren and Sloane had gambled with my security, and now they'd lost the home that had once been their stage. The fallout didn't stop there. The state's Financial Review Board picked up the case after Renee's report, citing misuse of fiduciary power. Darren faced an investigation that stripped him of his contractor's license. Without work, he turned bitter, blaming everyone but himself. Sloane filed for separation a month later, claiming emotional exhaustion, though everyone knew it was about reputation. Caleb, meanwhile, stayed close. He enrolled in graduate school for business ethics, a poetic choice, he said with a rueful grin. We'd rebuilt something rare between us, honesty without obligation, affection without debt. Watching him thrive was the only redemption this mess had to offer. One evening, as I locked up my small apartment, I looked at the signed check from the house sale, $41,000, resting in my savings. Freedom had a number now, and it was all mine. The ledger was balanced, the debts paid, and for once, justice didn't ask me to forgive. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If it struck a chord or reminded you of your own battles, share your thoughts below. Your voice matters here. Don't forget to subscribe for more true-to-life stories of justice, strength, and redemption. Until next time, take care of your peace.